to do is, over the years of shed hunting, I've been fortunate enough to find some of these buck skulls with shed antlers. And I never throw them away. I never, knew exactly what I would do with them. I don't know how they came to the demise. They shed their horns or antlers, and somehow they died shortly after that because they had no regrowth or anything on them. So what we're going to do, I'm going to show you something you can utilize this with. That last set that we found on Valentine's Day with me and Deb, we were out, I found one set that was just right for this mount. It matches the pedestal up real good, and what we're going to do is I'm going to show you, and I've done this before with real good results, but I'd never took the opportunity to film it. So I'm going to take this shed skull and these shed antlers. I got a matching set that you've seen us get on Valentine's Day. Deb had them. She was the first human that touched these antlers. We're going to reattach them to this skull, and it's fairly easy, and anyone can do it. It just takes a little bit of time, not a whole lot of time either. Most of the time spent on the drying down of the glues. So I'll take you through how we're going to put these onto this skull. Now, you're going to need a couple things to purchase. You're going to need some 2-part epoxy. You're going to need some, I use 1/4-inch bolts, at least 3 inches long, so they'll go down into the skull, and that's where you put the epoxy around them. And then you're going to need this repair putty made by Loctite, and you squish that together, and when it turns the same color, you will put it on the base, and you'll see it in how we do it in the application. But Loctite repair putty, 1/4-inch bolts, probably 3.5 inches long, 2 of them, and some 2-part epoxy glue to glue them into the skull. So I'll take you through this step by step. Yeah, the first thing you're going to have to do is you're going to have to get rid of that bolt head. And how we're going to do that was take a pair of bolt cutters and whack that head off. Now you just got 2 1/4-inch pieces of steel that we're going to put down inside the skull and up inside the antlers to strengthen it, to hold our epoxy and everything in place. First step. When you go to fit these antlers on there, there may be a little material in there like this, and it has a small little daub of antler material in there. So what we're going to do is we're going to knock that out of there and try to get that setting there as flush as we can. I might try to use the grinder to buff that off of there. I'll cut that, pop it off. You notice that's out of there now, and so when I take this antler, it fits down there a whole lot better. You can get a pretty nice fit right there on it, and that's what you want. And that way when you put it up there, it's going to bond real good. I might take the end of this antler and run it across there just a little bit. Try to smooth it up. If you got a belt sander, it'll do the same. That way it gets it pretty flat. And you can see that sits down there real nice and tight. So it's going to be about like that. Drilling this hole is not as critical, but you want to make sure you only drill it one time. Go to place the skull there, you got it at an angle, and figure it out there about here with your drill bit. And center it up as close as you can get it. It's going to wobble a little bit. Once it finds its own, it's going to go. This is relevantly soft material. You can push it up there by hand. You want to drill clear through until it goes through the skull plate. That one's through. Now once you've got that hole, that will let you get your bolt down in there. It can fit a little loose, give you a little bit to move it around, because you're going to epoxy that in there anyway. But that'll let that adjust it a little bit with your modeling clay or your two-part epoxy clay to hold that where you want it. So with that one done, we'll go over and get this other side done. Now you got your two holes there, and then you can take your two bolts that you had. They'll go in there, and you can get them down in, and we'll glue them in, get those glued in, and when we put them in the antlers, they'll have something to hold that to the skull that's rigid, not just a loose piece. When you get your two bolts put in there, they should have been long enough, and like I say, you probably 4.5, 5 inches long, and 1/4 inch will be just fine. That way they'll go clear down and sit against the skull on the inside. Both of them go down, and you leave approximately 1 inch sticking out. Yeah, now what we're going to do here, we're going to just take and put a little dab of paint on the end of this bolt, and that way it'll put a little black. We'll have a little bit of black there. It should come off on the horn itself. And I keep calling them horns, and I know they're not horns, but just put a little dab will do you. Some of you are probably too old to know what Brill cream was, but a little dab would do you then back there in the 50s. So anyhow, now all we're going to do is make sure you get the right antler, or the left antler, or whichever one. In this case is the right. And we're just going to bring it down pretty close to the center of that, and we're going to mark that about like that, and then we're just going to drill a hole up through there. Now you want to be careful you don't drill through the antler, but you see that's what that did. It put that mark on that antler. So now we'll go over here, start to drill up, and drill up inside there. Now that we got that mark on there, we're just going to push this up inside. Make sure you go up there straight. The antler's a little harder than the skull. Like that. Once you've gotten your 2 holes and 2 pins in there, sometimes they're going to be a little loose, but that's alright, because we're going to put epoxy in those holes, and then we can shape them and bend them. We'll try to get it to what we figure was the spread and the angle that it's sitting on. And it'll come out really good once we put the epoxy in those holes. Well, we've got it jigged up. You notice we got a clamp. Now when you put that clamp on its nose, that keeps it from rocking back. Don't put hardly any tension on it. Just bring it up against it, or you could break the skull. Doesn't need a whole lot of pressure. This particular rack, we set it up. It's probably a 2.5-year-old, and we got about 16.5. Now you got to be honest with yourself. You can make it whatever, but you're trying to keep it as realistic as it was. You know, antlers don't quite grow up, and you can still move it a little bit. Try to get the tip to tip somewhat normal, and as you walk around it, you'll get a feel for what looks right, what looks phony. We're just going to mix some of this epoxy up real quick, get it stuck down in those holes, up in the antlers, put it on the bolts, get those seated down in there pretty good. We'll get that around there. And we'll slide those horns right down on there. Give that a little time to set up. Don't take too long. You want to work sort of fast so that you don't have a problem there. Yeah, this material here, you just break it off and start working it together until it becomes one color, and then this stuff really sets up hard as a rock. It dries basically white. We got that mixed up in there. We put a big old glob down on this. This is going to form the base. Now this is highly sandable too. Now this has got about a 10-15 minute span between it before it starts to get hard, so you do got some time to work with it. Now just take the horn or the antlers and push them down in there as far as they'll go. Push your putty up around them. Try to make a nice seam there. Get it down on the skull itself. Work all the air out of there so you don't have any air pockets in there, which will be a hollow cavity. And just keep packing and tamping. And just keep smoothing it out, just like child's clay. You can bring it down onto the skull. Try to feather it in. Push that right down in there. Get the other one pushed down in there real tight. You might use some rubber bands for a third hand. But, that seems to help hold that over there. And you can get, you got some time. Like I say, keep looking at your rack. Get it set about the way you think you want the spread. We started out with a 16.5-inch spread, so that's what we would like to keep. Now, to pull that together a little bit, I've already made this hoop up. I can get it around here. Might have been, yeah. I can get that over there. Get that one up over. Slide that one down. That'll pull that back over there tight. And it's still a good representation of the spread. And just keep working that putty up around there. Everything looks pretty good. Might want to center it from the back so it doesn't look, you know, twist this one a little bit down. Dump some more putty in there. Keep working that out to where you don't have any air in there. You can add a little bit of this to there to build that base up. This is sandable, so when you get done, you can bring that on where it looks just like bone. There's how you get it done. It came out pretty nice, pretty simple. Probably takes you about an hour, you know. And like I say, keep it as realistic as you can, and you know, you'll get a feel for it as it comes about. So, making your own European mount, this will really look fantastic when we get it painted and stained up. It'll look like a work of art. We'll let the clay dry for 24 hours. And now we're going to take it off, and I'll show you what we got. Just snip this band off. It's tight, you can't get it back up over there. But we kept our measurement on the inside spread at, it stayed right there at 16. What we were shooting for was 16.5, 16. And that's right on the money. Now we can take our clamp off. And like I say, when you put this clamp on, don't put it on very tight. Alright, There's part of the outcome right there. Now the next step is, it's simple too. We'll just hand sand around here, smooth this up. It doesn't need a lot of smoothing, and but you know, the more precise you put that putty on, the less sanding you're going to have to do preparation. In the sanding segment, you can do it by hand, or you can enlist the use of a Dremel tool. Saves you a little time. It gets right in with it. But you got to watch it. It can get aggressive. So the more precise you put that putty on, the less you're going to have to sand. You can also incorporate just a good old heavyweight sandpaper. And like I say, all you're trying to do is feather this edge in to where it looks realistic, and that's basically, the sandpaper works just as good as the Dremel tool. And one thing about it, the sandpaper, you're not going to sand any more than you have to. It's never going to be quite perfect, but you just do the best you can, and it's going to be a far greater trophy hanging on the wall than it would have been just left on the forest floor. Takes you a little while, maybe spend a half an hour, and like I say, the big trick is when you're putting that putty on, put it on real discreetly, and that'll save you a lot of labor at the end. Well, as you can see, I'm looking at these dead skulls found. This is the one that the Valentine buck that we resurrected, and it falls right in line with the rest of them. You know, this has a little more profound skull to burr, whereas we're a little more conservative on skull to burr in this area. And I did that because you've got to remember we reattached that. So it's not, like I say, it's not quite as profound as right in this area on the original one, but you still have a good burr sticking up there. Yep, the next step is the painting process, and this is the canvas white paint. Nice, it's a gloss protective enamel. Goes on, gives a nice subtle sheen to that skull, a real artistic look. I like to wipe it down a little bit, some just rubbing alcohol. That gets any dust that I blew off, didn't get off, gets any oils or grease off my hands, and just makes overall, if you're going to take the time to paint this thing, it ought to be, you know, painted right. That's going to make a pop. And a lot of people have asked me, Mealey, what's in these videos for you? Well, I'm not making these videos for profit. I'm a giver, unfortunately, in life, not a taker. Yeah, the late Fred Bear gave a lot back to archery. He did a lot for archery just by giving. Didn't ask for monetary reimbursements. And that's what I'm doing here. I'm trying to show ways to fellow hunters and fellow Americans, or just fellow human inhabitants of this earth, things they can do, because I don't know where this video is going to end up with, or what country. As long as that's spreading the word and showing individuals that have an interest, a common interest, and I'm willing to share it, that way I can say what I want to say and do what I want to do, as long as it's ethical and within the game laws. I just want to pass it on, as they all talk about, but I seldom see that happen today. They all want to pass it on for a price. Well, you watching this video is my paycheck, and that's how I'll go about life. I don't have to be paid. You can't take it to the grave, but you can take this memory to the grave. So that's why I do these videos. Alright, I'm going to mask this off with some masking tape around the burr. That way, when I spray paint this, it won't get up on the rack. Okay, painting, as you know, is pretty simple. We'll start out there, try to get those cavities filled up, the nasal cavities. Start in there, get them, that's where it's going to be the darkest, and we want those covered up. Any holes, try to direct a good amount of base up in the nasal area. It goes on pretty simple, and I like getting it on wet. That way it really makes it pop. So, and there again, you can do several things on this stage. You can paint it multiple colors. You may not even select to paint it, but I like painting it, getting, like I say, do the cavities first, try to get a good heavy coat in there. You're going to have some running effect, but one that runs down inside the skull and covers it up. So, like I say, because black shows up those holes, black will show up real highlighted, so try to get those areas up in there done first. You don't have too many, but there are a few. So the rest of it just pretty much will elementary on painting. Alright, we're going to do the stain now. You can just get you some regular furniture stain. Make sure you got it shook up real good. And when you start this staining, you can use one of these little rubber brushes, a foam brush. They'll collect it. You want to make sure you don't get any stain on the head itself. And the best way to do that is let the stain come down. Start at the top, get your rack up like in this fashion, and bring your little piece of tape there, and bring your stain down. That way nothing can run up on the rack itself. Pretty simple, it's not rocket science. Just start get it good and soaked up. And like I say, doing it this way, there's no way that the stain can run down onto your newly painted surface. Just hold it up there and get it dabbing it on. And you can darken it to your desire or however light you want it. Well, here we are the next morning. We've got it dry overnight, and it's got a dark brown to it. Wipe some of it off, get it off, but make sure when you put that stain on that you keep this rack upside down so none of it would run down onto your skull. It's really important to make sure that it all runs off in a downward direction. But get all the excess that's still on there, and there's some that you can see that'll come off. If you don't want that dark, rich color, don't leave it on there that long. If you want to highlight them a little bit, you can come in there and brush it off a little bit with some steel wool. That'll put the tips up there a little shinier. And that's, that's there again. That's up to you on how shiny you want it or how dull you want it. It really makes it look like a neat trophy. And if you can remember just the other day what we had, this is what you're going to end up with. A trophy that you can be proud to hang on any wall. This is a work of art now, nature's art. Beautiful. As you can see, these are on real sound. They're not coming off. Remember, the skull was found, the sheds were found. There you go. European mount 101 with a... Well, there's the finished product. Hanging in the cabin. That one in the middle, me and Deb found that together also. and we done the same operation on it, putting those antlers on a skull. And then this one over here was the tribute to the 9.1 that we found together last year. So that really accents the cabin really good, and now you can see why I paint him white, that canvas white. It really gives it a nice finished look. And you know what? I didn't have to kill any of those deer. Oh, well, that's it from the non-typical Norwakian.